Next, there's quite a number of threats and vulnerabilities, and you've probably heard of many of them. First of all, there's viruses and worms, there's spyware and adware, bots and Trojans. Bots are kind of like an automated application. Just go ahead. Or an automated application that goes out and will take over different servers and different computers out there and use them to run whatever applications they want. A rootkit is unusual. It's a software system that programs that will hide the fact that a system has been compromised. So you may have a bot set up on your own home computer if it's left on all the time, and somebody may be running their own applications from it. What a rootkit does is hide the fact that it's been taken over. There's also things like software defects are a big problem. Sometimes you might have old software or software that's been corrupted, and that can affect your performance and security. Next is software bloat. What software bloat is, if you have in your office a number of computers and people are going out on the internet and playing games or downloading files or doing other things, often they'll download applications and tools, and pretty soon they're taking up more and more space on their, what they think is just on their PC, when in fact it's filling up all the space on the servers and making it more difficult to manage the whole network because it's getting bigger and bigger. And you may notice over time, as with adware, the network starts to slow down, and it takes a while. So often that's what it is. The next thing is human error. Often things are set up improperly, and so then you're going to notice performance slowing down, and even worse, often you're going to be opening holes in the firewall. This is difficult. And then lastly, improper configuration. Very often you'll have friends who are, or even a nephew who's really good at playing Warcraft, and he really knows how to set up a network. He'll come into the office and he'll set it all up for him. Before you know it, the thing's starting to crash and having all kinds of problems. Well, he only knew how to set it up for gaming. Well, in fact, you're trying to run a business, and that's always a difficult thing to watch out for. So these are some of the real threats to your network. So our point is, on to the next one, what can you do to really prepare your network for electronic health records implementation? First of all, you can conduct what we call a comprehensive network assessment, and that's where someone who's qualified will come in and review all the pieces of your network and make sure that it's running. First of all, they'll confirm that the internet service provider is actually giving you the bandwidth that you're paying for, and there's a variety of ways of telling that. Secondly, you can confirm that you have a commercial grade firewall, that it's present, that it's programmed properly, and it's functioning correctly. Next, also that you have a configured commercial grade switch. There's a variety of switches out there. You can go to some of the big box stores and pick one up for really cheap. That's not really what you want to do when it comes to your business and your practice, and most important, your patient information. Next, you want to make sure that your patient and practice information data is secure. And there's a variety of ways of doing that. You can confirm that by conducting this assessment and identify just how it's being protected. Also, it confirms that there's automatic server backups. We talked about how the server's backing up all the critical data. Well, too often, we just went to a client yesterday, and they had assumed that their data had been backed up. Well, it had been 2 weeks since it had been backed up because it wasn't automatically set up to back it up. So what had happened is if they suddenly lost power, their server crashed, they would be behind 2 weeks of all the data that they had been running and gaining and acquiring over those past 2 weeks. So that's critical. Next, the server you have to confirm that the server can actually be rebuilt from the backup files. We talked already about that one. Patches are software updates that are sent out. If you have Microsoft running on your computer, which most people do, you may get a little notice in the window, it's time to update your information. Well, too often we'll say, well, I don't have time for that right now. I don't want to take the time and slow down what I'm doing and have to have it shut down and restart. Well, that's critical. Those patches are set up to replace holes in the software of different applications. So what happens is we find out that hackers can get into your network through a hole in one of those applications. Well, these patches are really designed to fill those holes. So an assessment will help identify that that's been done. And then lastly on this section, wireless network. It's most important, I don't know if you've ever done this, but if I'm in a different city and I don't have internet access, I'll drive around neighborhoods and look for an open network that I can get into so I can get online. Well, that's very common, and even many businesses do that. They may have a wireless router set up in their office so that they can use it when they need it, but it's not locked down. In other words, it's not keeping people from getting out. So that's another thing that we check for when we conduct that. Continuing on, another thing that happens is licensed virus and malware software. There's a lot of free tools available on the internet, and one of the scary things is often a lot of those free tools come with adware and spyware. So when you download it, they're tracking a lot of information that you've got. So it's best to make sure that you buy a licensed and commercial grade virus and malware application. Next, security policies are observed and enforced. Many times we get lackadaisical about how we really let people use the equipment that we send them out with. The most common issue is with what we call road warriors, those who are out on the road all the time with laptops. They'll be using hotel wireless internet, and the problem is that is just a terrible place to be if you haven't got those things locked down well. And so what happens is if you're using a virtual private network to connect back to the company server, that's great because it's going to protect your information. But if you don't have your malware installed, what can happen is little computer programs will latch onto your computer through the wireless network. When you get back to the corporate office and you're not on the VPN, they can very easily start propagating throughout the network. So having those procedures and policies in place and making sure that they're observed will make sure that you can avoid those problems. The next portion is network components are maintained on a regular basis. We usually recommend that hardware be replaced or upgraded every 3 to 5 years. Like I said, many times practices or companies will buy equipment and just let it sit until it dies. Well, what happens is over time the performance drops, the capability drops, and pretty soon you notice that things just aren't going as well as you'd like them to. Next, that you have licensed software applications. Again, we talked about the free stuff that a lot of people like to download, or there's pirated software often. Nowadays, it's very difficult. Well, let's say it's a bad idea to use unlicensed software. Microsoft, as you know, is really kind of on a rampage now, shutting companies down or making them pay severe penalties. I think the most recent one was $500 million to a major corporation that had pirated software all through. So they're very serious about it, and now it's getting harder to load software on different computers, so they're tracking that. But that's even more important because it really makes sure that you've got all the functionality you need in those applications. The next one is that the backbone is adequate. Like I talked about, when you start loading up more equipment and more software, the backbone of the network isn't strong enough to handle all of that. So when we conduct an assessment, the whole idea is to verify that you've got enough infrastructure there to handle what you're requiring of it. Another thing I didn't mention yet, but I did talk about power, is surge suppression. Often we'll go to even a grocery store and pick up a power strip and think that's going to protect our computers. Well, they don't. All they are just extension cords. You really need to get a good commercial grade surge suppressor. What happens is, like as I mentioned earlier, as the power varies in the amount of wattage, that voltage that you're getting, that affects your computer. And what happens is if it continually is raising and dropping, or if there's a certain spike, it's going to send that spike straight through to your computer. So it's always a great idea to make sure that you have adequate surge suppression on every critical device in the network and in your office. Talked about the UPS, you know how important that is. And then lastly, network monitored and managed. Like I said, too often companies and practices are just setting it up and letting it run, and when it crashes, they're surprised.